Okay.
That was the purpose for that.
Oh, okay, that's in the packet though? That's
Somewhere in there.
It was it was in
That
your
was in a
packet.
separate, yeah, that
It
was
was in a separate piece of paper.
something it asked about if they could repair the, what they did for the testing
Right.
and the snow
Like the potholes and, yeah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Sorry.
19.5.
they got salt in them.
I'll encourage you.
Fully loaded.
That's not. You put the blade and you put salt in it. It should be over there.
Wow, yeah, so I'll be pushing the limit already, huh? Yeah.
The smaller one's 18.
Way to clean that off with a pickup truck, is there? Yeah, not, yeah. Wow.
Wait, if we get dumped with a bunch of snow.
Yeah, that's,
Snow and ice.
There, and might answer a lot of questions, because then she's gonna clean up the public comments after you
salt dispenser.
on that agenda item.
Okay.
Gotta open it first, right? Don't worry about it. Yeah. Oh.
It's all basics. No big deal there. Break and rent.
What's that?
Yep, 7.
I'd like to call the Ferrisburg City Council meeting to order tonight, Monday, January 6, 2020 at 7 p.m. Roll call, please.
Mayor Hop,
Here.
Councilmember DeWitt. Here. Councilmember O'Donnell.
Here.
Councilmember Carlson.
Here.
Councilmember Blease.
Here.
Councilmember Montgomery.
Here.
Councilmember Sias. Here.
At this time, I ask you to rise for the invocation given by Mayor Happ, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this new year and its blessings. We ask for you to guide and direct us through our leadership and our actions, keeping in mind always the enduring values of life, exerting our efforts in all areas and on all things for future generations can build with confidence. Please continue to protect our men and women in uniform and keep them safe from harm. We pray this in your holy name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time on the agenda is for any citizens to give a direct comment or question to City Council. Time for public comments will be given when an agenda item is discussed. If you have a comment or question, please raise your hand to be recognized by the mayor. After being recognized by the mayor, please stand, give your name and address for the record, and proceed with your comment or questions and limit it to 3 minutes. If anyone wishes to speak about Smith's Bridge, which is item on the agenda 7B, there will be time for public comment at that point. So is there any public comment regarding anything else? Yes, sir.
Roger Jonas, 16038 Harbor Point Drive. Of course, I'd have to sit in the back of the night like tonight, but anyway, Happy New Year, everybody. Wanted to make one request, and that was I had suggested the Planning Commission be reduced to 5 members from 7, and we have another application in. I think we're getting another one to bring us to 7, so I would request that you table that for 6 months. We'll see how it works out, and if we could maintain the 7, that's great. If not, then I'll be back again. So I can't remember which item that is on your
7D.
agenda. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other additional public comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll move down to the consent agenda 6. A, approval of December 16, 2019 City Council meeting minutes as printed, and B, adopt a proposed resolution regarding the leasing a portion of the premise of 17290 Roosevelt Road to Basketball Basics.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Motion support. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor stating aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Moving down to new business 7A, presentation by John Moxie and Don DeVries from Fleece and Vandenbrink.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? Does that work? Slide out of the way just a little bit. If you like what I have to say tonight, my name is John Moxie. If you don't, Don DeVries is 10 feet behind me. He takes the rest. We wanted to get back with you and update you on the work that took place last month. If you recall, we were charged with going out and doing some additional testing, following up on some of the work that was done last summer. I have a brief presentation. It's meant to be somewhat interactive. We have time at the end for questions, but certainly if you have a question at any point, we can stop and address it. This is following the report that was submitted last month, so it's going to flow very much like that, but we did want to hit the highlights at least and walk through what we have been doing. The first thing we're going to do is go back in time a little bit and review the bridge layout just to make sure everybody's thinking in the same terminology again. We're going to talk about the testing process itself that was done out on site. We're going to walk through the findings that resulted from that, talk about some of the analysis that then stemmed from those findings, and then talk about really what the heart of what we're here to do tonight is talk about next steps, recommendations that we have for you as a board. We're engineers. We don't make the decisions. We just try to provide you with the best information we can. And then again, questions, discussion can happen at any time, but we'll specifically circle back again at the end. So if you recall, this is what Smith's Bridge is configured. We have the box beams, we call them, because there is a box shape void inside them. And then those are all sandwiched together. The tops of those beams, the top 4 inches of those beams functions as the bridge deck. Then over the top of that, there is an asphalt wearing surface. That's not doing anything structurally. That's just to provide, ideally, a nice smooth riding surface for vehicles. So the purpose of our testing was really to remove the asphalt wearing surface from the tops of those beams so that we can get a look at those. That's one of the key concerns we heard coming in was what is the condition of those? We're worried about a car, tire falling in, something like that. So we really wanted to get our eyes on that. That was the focus. So the testing process itself, DPW was charged with picking out the 15 worst areas in their minds just from their experience with the bridge. Obviously, they go back longer than we do and have been patching holes on this bridge for some time. So the photo is just looking from the southeast corner there, and then the graphic below is just to illustrate generally schematically where those locations were throughout the bridge deck. You can see that all 8 spans got some testing in some form or fashion. It covered really the width of it. Most of the locations lined up with wheel paths like you'd expect. Where the wheels are applying their loads is where the asphalt surface is going to be in its worst shape. So once that asphalt was removed, we showed up on site with a testing firm that we used to do Swiss hammer testing. Swiss hammer testing is one tool in the toolbox. It's a fairly low impact, cost-effective way to at least get a sense of what's going on with the concrete itself. There is variability in the results. It's not perfect by any means, but we thought as long as we've got the asphalt off and we're looking at this, we'd like to do something more technical than just our eyes and some other tools that we use to try and triangulate where is this data pointing us. And the more tools and techniques we can apply, the higher the degree of confidence we have in the results if they're all pointing in the same direction. So that was the first one. Photo here is what that looks like. The tool is what he's holding there vertically. It is applied to the surface of the concrete. The little red hand grinder there was used to create a smoother surface than what's caused just by removing the asphalt itself. Very low damage to the beams themselves, but just to give us a spot to work from. Then on the left there, these are I call them the dumb hammers. These are just literally pounding on the concrete so that we can hear what it sounds like. You can tell if it's hollow. You can tell if it's going to come off. The mallet there on the left is really meant to, if anything is deteriorated to the point where it's not in good condition anymore, it will physically come off. The hammer on the right there is just to look for hollow points. So we did that in all 15 locations. On top of that, obviously, we were looking at each location, looking at what the concrete surface was telling us, looking for defects, just like we would on any inspection, and then obviously photographing it so that we could show you the results tonight. Some of you probably have been out and seen it with your own eyes, but we wanted to at least give some touchstones of what we saw out there. So what did we find? The Swiss hammer testing, again, it's not perfect, but what it's telling us is each location gets tested 10 times, and each of those 10 gets averaged. So the average of the averages is in the 4,000 to 8,000 pounds per square inch range, which is the strength we would expect to see. We suspect that the beams, when they were originally out there, were designed for 5,000 PSI. So that falls right in with what we were finding here. Modern bridge decks are designed with 4,000 PSI concrete by and large. From a visual standpoint, I was actually pleasantly surprised with what we saw. Very little damage, if any. The only damage we really saw was just on the very surface, likely caused by removing and replacing that asphalt several times over the history of the bridge. You can see in the middle photo here, we did tend to see some longitudinal lines, which look to me like the milling process. When the teeth of the mill comes by and removes the asphalt, you'll tend to get the lines in the top deck surface. On the far right here, if you can make it out, the picture doesn't show it great, but that location, the membrane, the waterproofing membrane was pretty much intact. We could still see the various layers of that membrane. So that was a good sign too. So all in all, again, those things all pointed to the conclusion that the deck is sound, is the conclusion. This, not that we need to go through it in depth, but this is straight out of the report. This was the summary that we did for each location. We documented for posterity's sake what did we find at each location, both in terms of the testing, the visual. We measured the asphalt thickness at each location. We found that the asphalt was thinner than what we would normally expect to see on a bridge of this configuration, down to as little as 1 inch. We suspect that the thinness of the asphalt contributed to some of the early failures out there. And then just visual comments. What did we see? Did we see some scaling? Did we see some spalling? What was on the surface? Then we went back to the office, and the goal there was to redo the analysis, the load rating analysis we call it. And bridges are designed to a certain load, but the loads in Michigan are much different than that. We have a load standard that is applied at the design stage, but then when a bridge is put into service, we have to look at every legal truck that could cross that bridge. And so that's what a load rating analysis does, is it takes each of those legal loads in Michigan and puts them across the bridge to make sure it's still safe based on what it is today. Not based on what it was designed for, but based on what it is today. I put here we took a conservative approach. You see the word conservative a number of times in our report. We tried to do that because we knew that there was some concern on this board yet. And so we wanted to, wherever we had a decision point, we wanted to try and steer it to the more conservative approach. We considered both the beams and the deck, and by that I mean we looked at the beams as they function carrying a vehicle from pier to pier, as a beam per se, but we also looked at the top flange of the beam as it carries the load of a wheel. So we looked at it both ways and found that it does meet the rating that we were looking for. Results were pretty consistent with the load rating analysis. We looked at it two different ways. First, we took the model that was prepared and ran that with our inputs, and then we created a standalone model just from scratch, our own model, and those two things were checking out pretty well. The right side here, this is just a snapshot of the report that gets filed online on MDOT's website. Once we get all those numbers, the load rating, we put it on MDOT's website so that it's available for tracking purposes so that they can audit it, things like that. The recommendation coming out of that analysis is a truck type posting. What you had before is a gross load posting, we call it, of 20 tons, and I've depicted them both here. You can certainly go back to that. There are reasons to do that, but the standard, we thought we'd start with the standard, at least for discussion, is to do a 3-truck posting. What MDOT does is they take their 20 some odd different legal loads and they organize them into 1 unit, 2-unit and 3-unit trucks. And so when we do our analysis, we do the same thing. We look at each category of trucks, and then when you go out and you see that on the road, this means that if you're a FedEx truck, box truck, you're good for 20 tons. If you're a normal semi, you're good for 22 tons, and then if you're the big gravel trains, things like that, you're 28 tons. Again, these are conservative numbers, but we wanted to provide some consistency with what was out there before, as well as we give ourselves a little bit of room for if you have a driver that doesn't know what their load is. Typically, when you get above 20 tons, a driver is going to know what load they're carrying, but that doesn't always happen. So there's multiple levels of conservativeness built into this setup. Again, we've got 2 different options for you. We're recommending that you would put up the 3-unit vehicle load restriction just because that is the standard. But again, there are reasons to go to just the gross load. One of them is that this is a little bit more conservative. You can see that you could potentially get a 28-ton truck out there. I don't think that road sees any 3-unit trucks, but it could legally if you were to go with this route. If you went this route, regardless of 1-unit, 2-unit, 3-unit trucks, anybody is required to be under 20 tons. So there's 2 different options again, and that's really based on your preference as a governing body, how you'd like to do that. The other thing I wanted to point out is you get signs at the bridge itself, which you've had in the past. MDOT and FHWA want you to have an on-bridge ahead sign ahead of the bridge, so that if you do get that 21-ton box truck, it has some time to make a decision to look for an alternate route. The way your bridge is configured, it's very close to the intersection on the north side, so the posting sign at the bridge has been doubling as that advanced sign, and it could probably do that again. We thought it might make sense to, in addition to that, maybe even ahead of that, put some additional signage, just to make sure everybody is aware this bridge is coming up, this bridge is load restricted, we want to keep it safe. And then on the south side, you would do something similar, just picking the cross streets that make the most sense to give people adequate notice. Recommendations, again, first, from an engineering standpoint, we've demonstrated to ourselves we can, with confidence, tell you it can be opened safely to traffic. Again, always with the caveat with restricted loading. That's our way as engineers of recognizing that it is a sick bridge. It's not a good bridge by any means. So we want to protect it. We want to keep that restricted loading. Install posting signs at the structure before you would open that. Those signs would need to be in place. Whatever action you decide to take, we would reflect that in the MDOT database so that it accurately reflects the conditions on the ground. We put here continuing the bridge inspection because it's been ongoing even with the bridge closed, but continuing bridge inspections, and again on an increased frequency. As bridges deteriorate, we want to look at them more and more frequently, just to make sure that things aren't changing faster than what we can keep up with inspections. So that is a 2-prong effort. Continuing the routine inspections above the water, everything that we can see visually above the water. We're saying every year. It had been on a 6-month frequency before that. We've done enough ourselves to satisfy ourselves that we think 12 months is enough. Again, that's up to you folks as a governing body. If you'd like to see it inspected more, you certainly can. We wanted to at least set a minimum of annually to do those routine inspections. Underwater inspections are typically done every 5 years, but we're suggesting let's go to 3 years. Again, because there is some concern about what's under the water. That was last looked at in 2017. Going to a 3-year cycle would have that done as soon as the weather allows this year, so you could get some timely information. And then again, you could look at the results and decide for yourselves with your engineering input whether we wanted to go back to 5 years after that or whether there's still some concerns out there. Updating the load rating calculations. This bridge is going to continue to deteriorate, just like every other bridge in the state. So every time we see a significant change in that bridge, we're going to want to update those calculations. It may drop from 20 tons to 15 tons to 10 tons. Legally, you're required to close the bridge once it can no longer hold 3 tons is what the law requires. So between what we're recommending at 20 tons and 3 tons, is basically the remaining useful life of that bridge, at least from an engineering standpoint. Probably the most important thing on here, The biggest safety risk at this point, removing loose concrete from the underside of the beams. There's very low risk to the vehicles driving on top of the beams. We can take care of that by restricting the loading, but the boats that are going underneath it are subject to, if you do have loose concrete, falling and causing an accident of some kind. So we're saying, again, at least annually before the boating season, after the freeze-thaw cycle is generally when we would want to see that done. If you get out there and have the DPW do it more often than that, that would be good. But you can gauge that based on, start a track record of doing it and seeing how much more loose concrete there is every time you're out there. Continue to pursue bridge grant funding. Again, we're not telling you to open this bridge and walk away. We're good. We've satisfied ourselves. This is a sick bridge. It needs work. So in some form or fashion, continue to pursue that bridge funding. And what we've demonstrated to ourselves, at least, is that something short of replacement can still be viable. We think it's worth putting money into to get those extra years out of it and keep that at a 20-ton load rating, or maybe even higher. The next funding cycle for that is May 2020. You'd want to get started on that fairly soon so that a good application can be generated, get a lot of letters of support, and just enhance the applications that you've been doing, whether it's a replacement or otherwise. That will need a resolution from you folks before the May deadline. So there are some things to start thinking about regardless of what you decide tonight. And that was fast, but if you have any questions, any other discussion?
Can you flip back to your first, the bridge deck? Okay. You do realize that those spans are two-piece.
Sorry, say it again?
The actual box beams are two-piece.
Two-piece, right. Each one of these cores is part of a 3-foot wide beam.
Right, so you have a core with a concrete around it, correct? So you have basically any moisture or water that gets in there can freeze, obviously, and push the deck up or down, correct?
Sure, yep.
So my question to you is, why have we got weep holes in all these beams, correct? Why weren't there camera shot in there to find out what the interior damage is?
One of the things we looked at and contemplated was something just like that, would be coring the top of these box beams to get access.
We didn't give you
them.
permission to core it, but we certainly
Exactly.
shooting the camera up inside those beams is a non-destructive.
There are small weep holes underneath. That's another step that could be taken.
They're
certainly.
1 inch. They're not small. You could certainly shoot a
Yeah,
camera in.
you could shoot a small camera, not like a sewer camera or something like that, but you could get a small camera in there.
So you could get actually a visual of what's happening underneath.
Yep.
You know, as this thing heats and cools and freezes and thaws, you can't tell me whether that cement heaved up or down, correct?
Whether the cement heaved up or down.
Well, we know we have water issue on this bridge. The water's infiltrating the deck, between the deck and the beams. We have water weeping out of the bottom of the beams, correct? We actually don't know where that water's coming from. You suspect it's coming from the expansion joints.
Yeah, well, and there's cracks throughout the entire deck surface. So the water is coming from the deck surface and migrating down. Some of it is getting trapped by the membrane and finding the path of least resistance. Some of it is making its way through the beams. Eventually, either finding one of those weep holes, most of the water is actually coming out through the beams near the joints.
Wasn't that done with your inspection? You know, my understanding was, you know, we were hiring you for a second opinion, and I expected a much more comprehensive inspection. We don't know what's going on underneath, correct? I mean, you can't tell me what's happening between those sections of those beams.
Visually, we see the bottoms of the beams. That's the part that we've been able to see for a long time.
You have a two-piece beam. Water infiltrates between the two pieces. it's gotta be deteriorating somewhere. You're assuming that it's popping up, not going down.
I guess I don't completely agree that it's a two-piece beam. It's got two cores inside.
No, come here, look at the print. You obviously didn't get the print of the bridge. Oh, seriously, I want an answer. This is my time, I get an answer. You have a inner with the two things, and then this 3 foot goes around, correct? All right, so this is 2.5. I don't remember the exact dimensions. But anyway, my question to you is, as this is 2Ps, and it's delaminating, or spalling as you say, is water getting in here and forcing these down?
This is a single piece of concrete
Right.
with two voids in it.
No.
It's poured monolithically.
Well, according to the print, and this is the design, the bridge engineers designed it, it's 2Ps.
Where are you seeing the joint?
So are you saying this line here?
This is one pour, and this is one pour.
No, that is one continuous piece of concrete with voids cast inside it.
So you're telling me that they put these dimensions on there just because?
Need the public to be respectful of the conversation that's occurring at this time, please.
He's just trying to figure what this line
The
is,
dimensions.
that inside
This
line.
is the steel reinforcement inside. Maybe that's what's confusing you. The lines
No,
inside.
no,
are
the
steel
corner, that's on the corners, right here. Steel reinforcements on the corners. Correct? That's what it
Yes.
says right there.
Yep, and you've got a
And then-
bar up here.
And then you
You've
got,
got a bar down here.
and you got a
and then
2
you've
inch
got the
pour,
longitudinal bars.
and you got a 2 inch pour, and a 2 inch pour.
No, that's one solid pour. Yeah, what they do is they set up all. And then they come through the paver. Is it? Yes, there's curb strip just down the road.
Why do we have two different lines on it then?
I think what you're
Because
seeing
one
the
is,
steel reinforcement.
no, one says 2 inch pour. It says 2 inch right there.
That's showing the
Three-
caster where they need to set that reinforcement.
And this, oh, okay. So this is not the actual drawing of the bridge. This is a drawing of,
This is called a shop drawing. This is the drawing for the company that cast the actual beams. But
Well-
either way, they would dimension where that steel is within that height of that beam. Exactly.
To hold it up.
Because it's designed to be at a certain point within the beam to function right.
So they're telling them where to set the chairs to hold the rebar up when they pour the concrete in to maintain the height, the engineered height. So Don, oh, that's right.
Second time, so.
I guess, I'm confused by the shop drawing and what you were actually showing, but I guess you're the engineer. You're
Yeah,
supposed to.
maybe
you're
the
supposed to know
confusion,
these things.
our drawing doesn't show the reinforcement inside these. It would just be too cluttered by the time you show the entire bridge. That is a detailed drawing of just the beam itself, so they're showing you more detail of what's inside that beam. Maybe that's where the confusion is.
Back to my original concern, we know we have water coming through them weep holes. I guess I was assuming, maybe I'm just an idiot, but I'm assuming that you were gonna shoot cameras up there so we could see what was actually going on inside.
I've never heard of that being done. I imagine it can be done. Again, there is styrofoam, or there was at one point inside there, so I don't know how effective it would be. We could certainly look into it and do it. My comments on the Swiss hammer testing, again, it was a cost-effective way to get quick information. That would be a much more involved process where you'd need a support boat underneath. You'd need to find the right company that could get a camera, you know, and a snake-type camera, probably like a sewer service lateral-type camera.
Part of the bridge is it you're calling stringers here?
Stringer is just another term for beam. That the box beams are also referred to as stringers.
I got our previous inspections. The stringers in 2015 were rated at 7. 16, they were rated at 6. 17, they were rated at 5. 2018, they're rated at 4. 2019 is rated at 3. Which our engineer, these are her numbers, which you agree with, correct? I mean, your report said your stringer's 433.
Yeah,
Apparently those are the.
going back to our original presentation,
But just a minute.
if I, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so obviously every year it's going down a number. I'm assuming that that's in the freeze-thaw cycle. That when we have leaks in there, we got moisture in there, we know it's cracking, we know it's getting in the cracks and it's freezing and causing problems. So I guess my question, why would we not, every one of these inspections were done in August, okay, from our previous engineer and you guys. I guess my question would be, why wouldn't we wait until April or May to do an inspection and see if these numbers are dropping? Because several things concern me. Number one, in 2008, we closed the bridge because it was unsafe. We redecked it, and on the stringers, we put some patches in there, correct?
On the stringers, I can't speak to that.
I thought you did the inspection. Oh, one of your guys did?
I can't
Okay.
speak to what was done in 2008.
Okay, well, that's when it was done. So my question is, well, I'll just read it. Cracking, coring, spalling, all that crap. And then you get down to the delamination. Now, we put a patch on there in 2008 because it was unsafe when we redid the decking. So now that patch is delaminating, which means basically it's falling off, correct? Well, if it was unsafe to support the deck in 2008, we repaired it, and we're right back to the same place where it's falling off now because it's delaminating. And you addressed that in here. I guess I'm confused why you would think. I can understand your load rating and all that there. Why wouldn't you recommend that we wait until next spring when we see the results of the freeze-thaw cycle of this year?
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you? I mean,
I
where it's
think
coming
so.
from?
I'm following your logic. The first thing I guess I would point back to is don't get completely hung up on the rating numbers, because again, for us to agree with another inspector means that we're plus or minus 1. So when they call it a 3, we're thinking it's a 4 or 5 in reality.
Or you could call it 2, which is
they could call it a 2. Then I would say I definitely disagree with that.
well, I'm just saying, you all these numbers, you guys are basically all the same with 2 different inspectors right through, and you both know basically word for word, by the way, the evidence of water getting in those, well, I call them pier tops, stringers, whatever you want to call them. They were deteriorating all over. I mean, that's obvious. I mean, but when you patch it to repair the bridge to keep it open years ago, and now moisture's getting back there and throwing that patch off, seems to me that that would be an unsafe condition.
Yeah, I did catch up with you there. You were calling this here the stringer. This is actually the pier cap.
Okay, yeah.
And yes, you are correct. That was patched, and the patches are starting to delaminate. You're correct.
Right, so we have a patch on there that's holding up these box beams in a traffic lane that's delaminating, and it's not a little patch, by the way. That thing's what, 6 foot wide and 2-3 feet deep, foot deep?
No. The pins that hold these beams on is
No, the patch on the pier cap.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting to. The pins that connect these beams to the pier cap are about 8 inches or a foot deep, and there's only one location on the bridge that you can actually see those. Those patches are much shallower than 2 feet.
Okay.
The entire cap itself, I think, is only 3 feet wide.
Okay, well, one picture we had, I didn't see it in your report, it was in, maybe it was in your previous report, where the beams are setting on a post, correct? They're
Yeah,
anchored.
those are the,
They're the
that's
anchors.
exactly what I was referring to, yeah.
Okay, and that anchor is basically gone, and that section of right there is gone.
The anchors are exposed. The concrete has spalled off, exposing those anchors, yes.
Okay, so what's the difference between, just for my own information, what's the difference between spalling and delamination?
Delamination is when the concrete breaks loose from the mass, but it's still held in place either by rebar or just by the interlock of the aggregates. Spalling is when it's completely been, it's been removed completely. It's fallen off of the structure. It's a void now.
We have on several of the box beams, correct? Where we have exposed re-rod.
You have some of both, yeah.
Okay. No. The design life of this bridge was 50 years when it was put up, correct? We're at 48 years.
Yeah.
What was the, you know, the load rating when it was built?
It was probably built to an H15. I can't quote you what that meant in terms of Michigan's loads.
I received information from MDOT that they stated that it was.
That's basically what MDOT's told us.
I guess I'd be curious if MDOT told you specifically that this bridge has no more life left and you need to have it
They
closed.
stated that it had no more life left. They said it was exhausted at around 40 years.
This type of bridge.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah, and you brought, that's right, you brought the graph. And basically what that is a tool for MDOT to show its designers, we're not gonna build this kind of bridge anymore because it fails quicker than a steel bridge does. Exactly, exactly. And that's not to say that we're gonna go out and manage our bridges because of what other bridges like this have experienced. We're going to manage this bridge based on what it actually is, what it's showing us, what it's telling us, based on the actual capacity that this bridge has. The other thing is that MDOT managing bridges is different than a local agency managing bridges. MDOT, by and large, never load restricts a bridge. It's very rare to see an MDOT load restricted bridge because they're carrying a much different kind of traffic than you are. They're carrying, you know, FedEx trucks back and forth on 94, things like that. They look at the life as to the point where it needs to be load restricted is generally their view of a bridge's life, because then they need to do something invasive to bring that capacity back up. You might not need it to carry a 77-ton, you know, gravel train. You might be fine with a 20-ton bridge, and so that's where it's different. Your life is a little bit different definition than MDOT's.
There's one thing I'll let somebody else talk about.
But according to the MDOT graph that I showed you, you first presented, he was alluding to this bridge specifically, because he was hit on this bridge, and he knows this bridge really well.
Yeah, and that graph is made for a bridge type. That graph has nothing to do with this bridge specifically, other than that it represents this bridge type and the general characteristics that they're seeing.
So was making reference specifically to this bridge.
Yeah, I guess I'd want to see from MDOT that they're recommending that this bridge stay closed before I change my opinion.
Nope, they have not have stated that.
Final thing here. I'm real uncomfortable with your weight limit, I'll be honest with you. Would it be safe and applicable to restrict it to passenger cars only?
That would be your decision as a governing body. Again, we're here to present the engineering background. If you feel more comfortable doing that as a board, that is your decision. Yeah, you can go less than that by any stretch.
Yes, Mike.
Wait. Currently, May 20, 2019, City Council approved a traffic control order number 2019-1, which reduced the weight of the bridge to 20 ton, and trucks are prohibited. So currently, that is what our standards are that we have. Unless council decides to do something different than what we have for this traffic control order.
So back to my question. Obviously, in your opinion, it would be safe to open it to passenger traffic only with, cars, light trucks, that kind of thing, without. So that would be what, a 10-ton basically.
Passenger cars are more like 3 to 5 tons.
So if we went to a 10-ton, we're more than safe.
Oh, yeah, you're even safer. What I'm doing is standing here as an engineering professional saying we have gone through the processes laid out by FHWA and MDOT, and we can recommend a posting of 20 tons. If you want to do something less than that, that's fine. What I would advise against is doing something more than that, which obviously you aren't suggesting.
Passenger cars, I could buy that, but I don't want any commercial vehicles of any sort going over it, which in this particular case, with your load rating, is possible.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And that happens somewhat frequently, where you would post it below the legal limit or below the calculated limit. Historic bridges, we do that quite often to just preserve them, to keep trucks off of them. This would be the same thing. You're just trying to keep as many of the trucks off of it, just to try and keep it healthy as long as possible, or keep it from getting more unhealthy.
Okay, what is your,
Mike, can we move on to something else?
go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you, I appreciate the questions.
Looking at this report, I've got some very serious concerns. And no, I do not have an engineering degree, but I'm being asked for risk analysis, and if I'm going to risk people, the safety of the public out there, I want to make sure my questions are answered. I did work for an engineering firm for a few years, and so I got quite used to the different standards and stuff and questions that were asked. And I do work in a profession where the standard governs everything we do. It looks like the one standard that covers the Swiss hammer is the ASTM C805. And going through that, there are a lot of different variables. And one of those variables is the temperature of the concrete.
Sure.
Our previous reports were based on warm concrete. The day this was taken, it was 36 degrees out.
I know personally, yes.
And the reporting, the results were not consistent with this standard. Some of those sites should have been retested according to this standard. Can you tell me what standard covered the hammer testing? That I find that kind of intriguing, that you just go out and hit it with a hammer and you base it on what you hear?
Yeah, we're looking for just delaminated concrete. We're looking for concrete that's deteriorated. I'm not aware of an ASTM for that one. MDOT uses that all the time. They actually have a chain drag system to kind of expand on that, where they drag a chain across the bridge deck, and then they can cover wider areas quicker. But yeah, it's just an old and tried and true engineering tool.
According to your report, this is from the April 30th report, talking about the stringer. There was spalling and broken strands and defects that significantly impact the load carrying capacity of the beams. We noted 4 beams with broken strands. That's what we can see. We don't know obviously what we can't see in there, and the extent to the damage. And going down here, along with Councilmember DeWitt's statement that every year the ratings keep going down and down and down. And the last rating we got was in 2017, 2018. The rating statement here, a rating of 2 indicates a superstructure will not support design loads. And based on the rating criteria, a rating of 2 is justified. Then it goes on and says, however, redundancy of type of superstructure, damaged beams connect, or makes it better condition. So we're looking at, back in August, this was a 2, maybe a 3 because of the supporting beams. And also, we understand that the concern for the integrity of tops of the beams and not the overall beam capacity was primary reason for closure of the bridge, and that's not true. It was the overall condition of the entire bridge.
Okay.
You gave us a report on the top. We can certainly reinforce the top, but what are we going to do about the underside of the bridge and the supporting structures? Right here, you're looking at the underside, looking at a 2. That's not going to support the load. Could it fail? According to this, there is a possibility that it could fail.
Yeah, the word design load is in there, and we would not recommend putting a design load across this bridge. That is very true. That is very true. But can it support the 20 tons? Absolutely, it can.
But it's still rating as a 2. There's a possibility of failure, and I know about the design loads. Mm-hmm. That's a stringer. Yep. You were kind of, well, it looks like a 2. Well, this says it's a 2, but we're going to go with 3. And
Okay, right now,
Or not just,
this is
okay.
his turn to talk. His turn to
Just
talk.
wanted to clear that up.
I guess what I would say is the worst spots on the bottom of that bridge would rate out as a 2. But remember that you've got a lot of different beams that are all connected together, working together. So given the way the bridge is designed to function, we think it's a, it's a 3, it's a 4, somewhere in there is where it would really, rate doing the report. Sometimes in a report we'll say when there is a disparity like that, sometimes if the disparity is big enough, we'll say we're going to rate beam number 1A over here, we're going to rate that a 2, but you know what, the rest of the beams look fine, we're really going to rate this a 5, just because there's one bad beam, and that's what the load rating's based on, doesn't necessarily govern the entire bridge. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Well, it does. However, this is when you're talking about the damaged areas, it's in the drive area. Mm-hmm. It's going to get weight put on it. Now that I would like to see more of a study on the underside.
This is his time to speak and ask questions. The public will have their time to discuss when we are through.
Okay. I would like to see a study that indicates the entire structure, not just the top of the bridge. That's like going out to North Shore Estates and telling those people out there that you got a great roof, we'll patch that up and it'll hold up just fine, and ignore the loss of.
Yeah, well, yeah, and three basic things that we look at. There are 3 components that consist of the bridge, the load carrying part of the bridge. One is the beams, which we looked at. I just lost my battery. The beams we looked at. There we go. That is the controlling part of this bridge. The other parts are the abutments, which look about as good as what I could imagine from a 1972 bridge, and then the piers. The piers we considered looking at the underwater inspection that was done in 2017, looking at what we can see up above the surface, looking at the cap, all of that was taken into consideration when we're doing a load rating, and your beams here are the controlling part of that load rating. It's very rare that the substructure, either the piers or abutments, are the controlling factor in the load rating, just because the beams tend to deteriorate quicker, and the substructure is usually designed for a higher load than what the beams are.
Okay. Let me get my notes here. Now you're saying this is safe to open as is right now? We could go out, if we authorize it to open, they could go, DPW could go and remove the barricades tomorrow, and cars can go resume going across it. How long would you guarantee that's safe for?
Well, it's not our job to guarantee it. What we're doing is we're saying if we inspect it every year, we're saying until that next inspection, you're good to go. Based on everything we know about the bridge and our engineering judgment and our engineering analysis, we see it good as being good for another year. Again, it's going to continue to deteriorate, and it's going to be continuing to get looked at over whatever life it has left. But that's our job, is to tell the public we've done our job, we've done the process. The next inspection cycle is scheduled for this. We feel comfortable with it from now until whenever that next inspection cycle is.
Okay, so if the rate of deterioration is, it deteriorates quicker in the next year, you can't really say it will last a year.
You can't say that for any
No.
bridge in the state.
No. And in the condition that it's in, you can't guarantee that it'll last a year.
Nope, can't guarantee it for any
No.
bridge in the state.
But you're asking us to say, okay, and there's some people in the public that want us to open that bridge up, and again, risk the safety of the public driving across the bridge that's in bad condition.
Right now, public will have their time to discuss things when they're done.
What I'm suggesting is we've gone through the process that MDOT uses, the process that the federal government tells us we have to do for this bridge to try and give you the information. And if you don't trust that information, I don't know what I can say.
Okay,
Are you done, or do you have something more?
The other, Don just mentioned, and maybe I didn't reiterate it enough, but within that analysis that we've done, we've gone above and beyond the normal safety factors that are built into that. Again, this bridge can support something more than 20 tons, but every time we had a chance to take a left or a right, we went to the conservative part of that, for whatever that's worth.
Thanks, John, for all the information. I do have a question. Have you guys worked with other municipalities recently to help them secure any funding for repairing any bridges?
I got 5 bridges funded this past cycle. I think 4 of them for preventative maintenance or major rehab.
Okay. Do you know how much those money amounts were by chance? Off the top of your head?
It's in the millions. I can't tell you for sure, but it's probably between 1 and 8 million.
Okay. So it seems like there's at least possibilities to help secure funding for repairing.
Yeah, I've talked to folks on the boards that make those decisions, and they've given me pretty strong indication that if you were to come in with something less than a replacement, even if you went and did a full superstructure replacement, I think you'd have a pretty good chance of getting funded. Full superstructure replacement might be overkill, again, because your piers are already 50 years old. Again, when we spoke last, I mentioned we're going to try and match the repair life to what you've got left underneath. That would be the goal, to try and spend the money the best we can.
That do you know, with the MDOT meetings that I have attended and the individuals that I've worked with, yes, they are in agreement with exactly with what you said, the funding that could possibly be available, plus also the state legislators. So,
Okay. Thanks a lot. That's all I have.
Thanks.
Councilmember Sias.
Thank you. Going back to funding, I think it's believed that if we keep this bridge closed, we will have better chances of receiving a grant from the state. In your opinion, in the past, has that been true? Or do we open it and will we still have the same option or chances of receiving grants for repair?
Yeah, my understanding of the process is your chances of funding are largely based on numerical values when you get to this situation, based on our load rating analysis. Where does it sit? Whether you choose to post it below that, I don't think helps you. I could be wrong on that, but I don't believe so. The other thing to consider is that once a bridge is closed for 5 years and no action has been taken, it comes off their list for funding. So you do have a bit of a clock. If you're actively trying to pursue funding, I think that 5 years can get extended. But if you walk away from the bridge for 5 years, it's no longer considered a bridge anymore, basically.
Okay, all right,
Currently, it's on the list with MPO for 2025.
good. Going back to the stringers and the piers, if we decide to repair the bridge, is there any repair for the stringers or the pier? Is there any way that we can lift those ratings from a 2 to a 4?
Yeah, specifically the pier cap itself. The reason the piers are rated a 4 is because of a spall somewhere around here that's compromising the bearing of a couple of those beams. A good solid patch in that area would get you right back up to a 5. There are some things that may need to happen on the columns themselves, but really that one spall is governing the rating of that. So that would immediately, in my mind, kick that back up to a fair condition. There are other things. There are, council member mentioned, there are some of those older patches that are delaminating. We replace those at the same time would be my suggestion.
Okay, and that can be done, if we decide to repair it, that can all be done at that point then?
Yeah, any solution we would suggest would be a comprehensive one, not just dealing with, the stuff up top, but, top to bottom.
Okay. And I guess in your professional opinion, this bridge is safe to open, correct?
Correct.
And is there any reason why you would deem it unsafe to open?
Only at a load greater than what we've calculated is the only thing I can think of.
Okay, that's all I need. Thank you.
John and Don, I'll speak for many that thrilled to hear the reports that you feel in your professional opinion that the bridge is safe to reopen with the load restriction, as you stated. Regarding the testing, Swiss hammer testing is a industry accepted method of testing strength of concrete.
Yeah.
And then core grilling is also.
Yes.
Is videoing inside of the stringers normally done or industry accepted?
It's a unique idea. It's something I hadn't thought of before. I don't know of any cases of where it was done, but it would be, it would fall under the category of visual inspection. It would just be special access for a visual inspection.
The Swiss hammer testing, it seems to me that if temperature was a major factor, that they would offer some temperature compensation.
Yeah.
Figures, is that offered for Swiss hammer testing?
There are some adjustments. I'd have to defer to my testing company. That's why we brought in the experts.
Yeah, you hire somebody out because they know the game.
Yeah.
So if temperature was an option, a factor, they would have given you temperature compensated results.
I assume so.
Yeah.
The other thing is we weren't using it to pinpoint what is the strength of the concrete. We were using it more to figure out, is this deck sound? Not is it 4,500 or 4,000, but is it sound concrete? Does it show any signs of a deterioration more than what we can see?
So just for clarification for everybody here, each stringer that looks like a concrete block cross section there. That is an individual piece of concrete that's poured monolithically. It's not two-piece. On the top is rebar. On the bottom is steel stranding. The rebar on top is for the load on the deck, right? And you tested that using Swiss hammer testing. And then on the bottom is where the vast majority of the load is actually carried for the bridge, and that's how the weight is dispersed of the bridge and of the vehicular traffic, correct?
Correct. As each beam functions, it's the strands in the bottom, and then as each beam functions together, there are also tendons that go the entire width of the bridge that help them act as a
spread the load,
crew.
so that if you have a bad beam in a tire area, that load is spread across many stringers to spread the load.
Yeah.
What's the worst case that we've got broken strands in the actual load carrying portion of the beam, which is the bottom portion of the beam?
Yeah, the analysis is based on 4. I don't think I saw more than 3 on any one beam.
And when the beams were designed, how many of those strands could be broken and still maintain full strength, the full rated strength?
That's a question I'm not prepared to answer. I don't know. But
Okay.
based on it, there was safety factors built into that. I can't quote you.
Because
that
there's
is.
what, 17, I believe, in each beam?
That sounds right.
I believe it's 17 of the steel strands that are in the bottom of each stringer.
Correct.
That's it.
So one thing that was brought up when this bridge was originally closed was the fear of a tire falling through the top of the deck and somebody getting hurt. Is that a serious risk right now based on your testing of the deck?
No, based on what we saw, I have no fear of that. I was actually expecting to see, based on the condition of the asphalt, I was expecting to see something quite a bit worse from the concrete. But they look, very good considering, their age. The only damage we really saw was just from the act of pulling the asphalt off a couple of times over its history.
Last engineering firm that looked at this, I understand they didn't do as in-depth of tests as you did, but they did recommend testing every 6 months. Is there any benefit to that compared to the annual testing?
Yeah, and probably what they recommended was the inspection every 6 months. Yep. And again, I'm totally comfortable with that. It just gives you one more data point every year to see how it's performing, to track whether it's continuing to deteriorate like we think it will, or if it's speeding up, things like that.
I know you talked before about some recommended repairs that you thought could at least maintain 20 or even increase that rating. If we were to open this today or open this week with the patching the holes you put in and adding new signs, how long do we have to safely operate this bridge before we have to make those repairs?
Again, we presented it originally as a 2 to 5 year fix. That's not based on calculations what we run. We just wanted to give you a planning tool to continuing to pursue funding. Again, we don't want to just open it and walk away. We want to have a plan coming, but in the interim, it's safe to open. Again, as long as you're inspecting it on the right frequency and adjusting things based on what you find, that's...
Now, is that something you guys do as assist us with writing the grants?
We can, yeah. Again, we were pretty successful last year.
Okay.
Doing that.
And have we, Craig, have we had companies like this help us write the grants in the past? Okay. But they were always for full replacement?
Correct.
Okay. And then I just have one more for the city attorney. What liability do we have if we have an engineering company?
Sure. Our legal advice will be offering information following this discussion before we move into public comment, because I believe his insight is going to answer some questions that some people in the public may be having at this time. Any other questions? Good. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, but I do have, just for clarification reasons, back to the Swiss hammer. Anyways, you gathered that information, utilized it into your data set, and provided these results, correct?
Yeah.
So to me, then you're taking full responsibility for what S&S provided you with, correct? Because you're working off from their expertise and their information on this,
I think
correct?
that's fair to say.
Okay. Just want to make sure that that was out there. That was a concern that I've had in multiple conversations with individuals. So.
Yeah, we have a good working relationship with them. We wouldn't have hired them unless we trusted them.
And they're also on MDOT's preferred list of vendors too, along with many others.
Sure.
So, okay. Guess at this time we're going to open it. We'll have our legal counsel speak and then public comments. Will you be staying around or do you need to leave if there's additional questions? Okay. Thank you. Oh, yes, certainly.
You guys.
Would you like to back? Okay.
I'm sorry. Felice from Vandenbrink did the repairs of the Douglas Saugatuck Bridge. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And did that bridge come in within cost and time when you did that? How are your estimates on that?
Yeah, actually, that one did come in a little bit under budget. The time frame on that one is a little bit weird. We changed it to put the construction over the winter because of, they're much like you, where they get a lot busier during the summer construction season. So that one, the time got changed, but it wasn't a delay or anything like that.
That's quite an undertaking. I'm kind of familiar with that area, and that was a pretty big job.
It was
so
a, it was a
just
fun
curious.
project. A lot of
Yeah.
unique challenges.
Yeah, yeah, good.
Thanks.
To speak?
You ready?
Yes,
for
sir.
me? Okay. So, I was asked to provide simply what is the liability of the city if something were to happen with the bridge if it was reopened, and I can talk specifically about what governmental immunity is, and what some of the exceptions to governmental immunity are. I can't tell you whether to open the bridge or not. I mean, that's something that you have to rely on, your expert, your own decision making on. I can only tell you what the legal ramifications are if something were to happen, and who knows what that is. So, with governmental immunity, municipalities enjoy immunity from tort liability generally. So, if something happens and it's the city's fault, typically because the city takes on a number of responsibilities on behalf of the public, they're going to enjoy immunity from any civil liability damages. One of the exceptions is the highway exemption. So if a highway, public road, including a bridge, if there is a maintenance issue with it that the city knows about or should have known about and doesn't address, and it causes damage to somebody, then there could be a responsibility on the city to cover that. Now, it's very fact intensive, depending on what the situation is, depending on where the issue arose, whether you knew about it, whether you should have known about it. Now, you've obviously done a lot of looking at this 450 feet of road, so you're pretty well apprised of what's going on. And if something were to happen, then you may, fall within that highway exception. But that's very, very fact specific to what the situation is. So with governmental immunity, it's very broad. It's very pro, benefiting to the government. However, there is the highway exception to that, and that's if you knew or should have known of not a design defect, but a maintenance issue, and you don't address it, then you may be liable.
For addressing that, because we were in discussion. I was discussing with Craig in regards to this, because there are 5 exceptions that are under there, and the highway is one of the 5 exceptions that fall under there. So before we move forward, does council have any additional questions for our legal counsel who is here present tonight?
I have a question. Ma'am.
Yes, sir.
In your opinion, did this council meet due diligence to counteract a liability suit? With all the testing we've been through and everything?
I mean, you have reasonable diligence. Now, what you do with that information is another thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, I mean, yeah, you've done a lot to figure out what's the status of the bridge, and you've had very good professionals that have been there. It's not like city council went out there and looked at the bridge. You hired a professional to go out and do testing and take a look at it. So whether it's a very loaded question to say, have we done everything we can do? I mean, you could probably do more, but at the same time, you probably did a lot too. So it really depends on what you're specifically asking.
I mean, if there's a failure on the bridge after all the testing that has incurred and we've been through, would the city, would we be able to cover ourselves with what we've done already? Is there enough there, to where we wouldn't be liable, basically?
I honestly can't answer that question because it really depends on what happened. Right. What's the what part of the bridge failed? What is the situation? It's very fact intensive in that regard. I can't tell you that. I mean, you have professionals that have said if you post limits, it's going to be good for a year. Essentially is what they've said. But if there was a specific issue in the report that said this is an issue and that part fails and causes damage, then that might be different than if another part that was not an issue became an issue during the year.
Greg, or Brooke, what is the engineer's responsibility here? Are they liable in any way, shape, or form? Legally?
Depends on what your contract says in regards to that, but I can't say that right now anything that they've done would put them on the hook for anything. I mean, he said during his thing they're not guaranteeing anything, so I wouldn't say that at this point without looking at what I've looked at the original bid, like RFP and that information, but at this point, they've said we.
Answer is no.
I mean, unless there's something I don't know about, but at this point they've said, that they're not guaranteeing this; they're providing their professional opinion on it.
So if anything happens, the city's 100% on the hook.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Like I said, it's very fact intensive. I mean, like I said, the city enjoys a broad governmental immunity. There's an exception to that. The exception would have to be proved by the plaintiff in the case, the injured, that exception is met. So the burden is on them. It then shifts to them to show that there's an exception to this governmental immunity. So if they can prove that there was a maintenance issue that was not addressed and that caused the injury, then the city might be liable. But I mean, that's
pretty high bar.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to them to prove it.
Explaining that. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Okay. Before we move into 7B, which is discussion and take action if appropriate regarding the next steps for Smiths Bridge, I'll open it up to public comment. Is there anyone that'd like to come up for public comment? Yes, sir. You can stand at the podium, state your name and address, please. And again, there'll be 3-minute presentations.
Yes, my name is Keith McRobert, and I'm at 16273 Riverdale Court in Spring Lake. I have 2 questions. One is for John, and one is for the council. John, you had mentioned, I think in your initial presentation, that we could get maybe 15 to 20 years of added life out of the bridge if we were to go, and I'm paraphrasing my memory here, if we added another foot of concrete with rebar, and we could get another 15 to 20 years, that would be between, I think it was around $750,000 to $1 million, rough numbers. Are you still suggesting that we take that action from an engineering perspective?
Correct on that. We called that the structural overlay option, where we would put a new concrete deck on top of the beams, take off the asphalt. And basically what we saw last month just confirmed in our mind that's an option available to you. Not necessarily that that's exactly what we would recommend, but we think it's a good option.
And would that option get us another 15 to 20 years?
There would be a design life associated with anything that we did, and as you've seen, design life doesn't necessarily translate into the actual useful life of the bridge, whether it's original construction or a repair, but that would be the goal.
Okay. Second question is for the council. I'm pretty new to this area, and I understand that there were 2 engineering firms that looked at this. The initial one made an assessment, and the council, based on that, decided to close the bridge and suggested that the bridge be torn down. And then
June 17,
okay.
And by roll call vote, it was voted to close unanimously. At that point, while we were seeking additional funding, the discussion to tear down was never discussed. As a council to make a motion to move forward with that, it had been brought up in a discussion. And I believe a couple people in the public had mentioned that also it might be cheaper to do that for council.
Okay, there was.
Does that clarify?
You know, a lot of the information that I picked up from the media was the bridge.
Sure.
Tear down the bridge, $13 to $15 million. I guess my question is, how did we move from something as drastic as that to saying now we've got a bridge that we can open up, it's safe, given the weight restrictions? I don't understand the discrepancy between the initial assessment and analysis and recommendation and what these gentlemen are telling us today. There's a huge discrepancy between those, and I'm wondering if somebody could speak to that. Thank you.
There's not a large discrepancy between it. The engineering firm that we've worked with over the years had put this information out there. Council discussed it with the engineering firm, and at that time on June 17, this was even after the November 17 failure for a millage that we asked the residents, and it was voted down 2-1. Then when we were receiving more information from our engineers every year, we moved to having inspections done to that. Because of the deterioration, the council moved to close the bridge, and the council moved unanimously to close the bridge on June 17. At that time, we were still seeking funding. We were waiting for grant proposals to come through, and then also it was a line item on the 2020 budget with the governor. It was a separate line item that way. And then at this point, residents decided that they'd like to seek more information, and it was allowed to, and the city moved forward, hired Fleece and Vandenbrink. Fleece and Vandenbrink now has done 2 presentations regarding their findings. Additional public comments at this time? Yes, sir.
Marcus Joseph, 16858 Cecilia Lane. I've been to quite a few of these city council meetings concerning the bridge. I really think we need to trust the engineers. We need to trust what they're saying. And this is no due respect to this council, but I wouldn't put it past you guys to close the Mackinac Bridge. So, I mean, no due respect. I know you got to do your diligence, but there are many bridges in this state that are a lot worse off than Smith's Bridge. We've got to trust our engineers. A city attorney has given his input. I would feel comfortable as a council with no liability based on the due diligence and the engineer's report. I do think it probably should be resurfaced a little bit, of course, fixing the holes, and I think you mentioned the thickness. Thickness on the asphalt is a little below what it should be. I think it should be resurfaced before we opened it. Inspected every year. We can't open it like it is today because there's holes in it. So, I mean, they'd have to fix it somehow to make it eligible to open. And then inspect it once a year, do the 3-year below water inspection. And then at the same time, let's start looking at ways to raise $650,000 or $1 million to fix it in the future. And then we, of course, have to close it again to fix it. But I just think we got to listen to our experts.
Any additional public comments at this point? Anyone else? Yes, sir.
In regards to resurfacing it before it's reopened, on council's desk today was a letter from Craig, city manager Craig, asking the DPW director about what needs to be done in terms of repairing the areas that need to be patched. And Matt from the DPW's opinion was the damage to the areas used for destructive testing can be patched rather than total resurfacing.
Any addition? Yes.
Valerie Blondin, 17728 170th Avenue. And my question goes, I guess, a step beyond having a short-term plan and a long-term plan of what we're going to do. But what I'm wondering is when we go forward and we have to do some fixes, if we don't get, because we have a bridge of convenience, and I don't know if that makes a difference on the funding piece of this, of we're going to get funding or not. But if we look at saying we don't have funding, at what point or what dollar amount does it go to a vote to the public versus being a council decision on moving forward with whatever steps we need to take?
Council decided to put out for a millage.
Is there a dollar amount threshold? Is it a budgeted amount threshold, or
No,
is it
it was
just?
whatever the council would decide if we needed to go out. I know city manager had worked up some different analogies on getting different funding and how much the millage would be, anywhere from a 3 to 3.5 to 4 mil earlier.
Okay.
But we decided not to put it on this past ballot because it was defeated 2-1 in 17, and
I
it's
just
pretty
didn't know if
hard
there
for
was
people.
anything in your policies or anything that you had to follow if it was over a certain amount in your budget
No.
or something. That
We
had
could
to
do it
go.
for half mil or something like that also,
Okay.
if we chose.
Thanks.
Any other additional comments? Yes, sir.
Jake Sturley, 16269 Suffolk Drive. My question's more for Craig. Matt from DPW, did he give you any indication on how long it would take to fix those patches?
No,
No?
it's something we could work on.
I would assume that in order to open the bridge, you have to fix the patches and get signage, correct?
City council votes to open the bridge. We will direct staff to do what they need to do, get the bridge open as soon as possible.
That you don't have any kind of, just ASAP?
Right, you know, it depends on the weather. You know, if they got a snow plow, they're gonna be doing the bridge. And just,
But we're talking days and weeks here, not months.
That's correct. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any additional comments? Yes, ma'am.
Marie Ellingbo, 16127 Harborview Drive. I just wondered, currently, I have a budget at home. Do you have a budget where you put so much dollars amount aside for the bridge, just for maintenance?
Some of the Act 51 funding for that. The last 2 huge repairs that we've done in 85 and in 2008 have all come out of our
budget, but you
out of our
continue to
budget.
put money aside?
No.
For the maintenance? Why not?
Well, because it's part of our Act 51 funding that we utilize.
So can you start putting money aside, though? I mean, we have to do this at home.
Certainly.
I would think everybody.
That's a consideration that the council can,
that
when we're
should be
reviewing the
done.
budget, on how
Yeah.
we want to line item.
Okay, I just thought that's common sense.
Any additional public comments? Yes, ma'am. You have a chance at the end.
Thank you.
Debbie Murdoch, 16063 Lake Point Drive. I say open the bridge. Enough of this craziness. The bridge should never have been closed. It was never declared unsafe. And engineers know more than our city council. No one ever said it needed to be closed. This whole situation has been unnecessary. Totally a waste of time and energy. I say open the damn bridge.
Any additional public comments at the time? Hearing none. Councilmember Carlson, you had a question.
I thought it was my opinion that it was, weren't we saving money towards the bridge?
we have restricted money for the bridge, correct.
There's some in most, and then also the Act 51 money.
So this will be the third year we've done that, so we're probably about $200,000.
Right, and then the property sale, we had voted to have the property proceeds from that recent sale go to the bridge fund as well.
That's correct.
That put us over the 200,000.
Correct.
And then maintenance of the bridge.
No, it was 200,000 plus that.
Okay, and then maintenance comes out of street funds.
Correct, major street fund.
Okay. Correct.
Okay. Any other public comments at this time? Okay, hearing none. We'll move on to our 7B, discussion and take action if appropriate regarding the next step for Smith's Bridge. So we would need a motion and support before we have further discussion.
Your Honor,
Yes, sir.
I make a motion that we reopen the bridge as soon as possible.
Second that.
Okay, there's a motion and support to reopen the bridge as soon as possible. Further discussion. Oh, go ahead.
So I just want to point out, we got a good presentation from American Roads last meeting. They gave us some very unique funding options. I know as a private company, they're able to get things done cheaper and faster than a municipality is. But one thing that they did note is that it will drastically increase our chances of them helping us if they were able to do an accurate traffic study. And in order to do that, we need the bridge open.
We also have done a traffic study prior to closing it. Estimated between 5 and 6,000 cars travel the bridge on a daily basis.
I understand that. That's why I asked him.
And Mike,
I think if we open the bridge, we should have it passenger vehicles only, which would be what, 10 tons? That would be.
Is that what it is now, or what it was?
Well, they're recommending 20. If we go 10, that eliminates all commercial vehicles.
we already have that.
Right.
Trucks, they're currently prohibited.
No, at 20.
She's saying that's what it was when we closed it. You're
this is
pointing at
still-
what he recommended.
Right. What?
This is still in act right now, currently. This is still on the books.
Right. That is correct.
So essentially, we'd be opening it to the previous load rating, correct? Or previous regulations?
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
That's what we have right now. Were you looking at changing something?
Yes, I would like to change that to passenger vehicles only, which would be.
That's what it
Because we
is.
already have it. Trucks are currently prohibited.
You're thinking of what he's recommending, but she's saying that's what it is. It was already restricted.
May 20, we restricted this.
You know,
That trucks were prohibited, signage was put up, and our officers were aware of this, that they would be able to notify any truckers. Craig, city manager and staff has reached out to area businesses, notifying them when we change this to eliminate any truck traffic coming over there. I live next to the bridge. Whenever I would see trucks going over, I'd notify the city, and they'd reach out to the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department if possible. So that is currently on the books.
So what would be the objection of limiting to 10 tons? If we cover all passenger vehicles, there would be no question, period, of any. See, what my concern is.
Wouldn't that affect the plow trucks if we lowered it to
Right.
10 tons? I
Because
believe-
right now, our plow trucks, the large one to be able to plow this winter, is at 19.5 ton. And that's with the 2 plows and loaded with salt. So if we eliminate that, then we're eliminating our ability to plow and keep that bridge open to traffic this winter.
So can we just, would it eliminate it if we left it at the recommended 20 tons, or even left it what they did before and created a designated trucking route through Ferrisburg?
Recommendation would be to probably put a sign back on, over on 3rd. So any trucks would just get off 104 and jump onto 31, bypassing that corridor. So, any other additional comments or question?
I've got just a clarification. One of the things that we took under consideration when we closed the bridge was the rapid deterioration of the bridge, going from a 6, 5, 4, 3, 8-year rapid deterioration. We didn't want to continue that to happen. And we also did not want that bridge, we did not want to end up on the news as having a bridge that collapsed. It was over the concerns for the safety of the people that travel that bridge and the residents of this city and the surrounding areas. That is one of the considerations. It's not fear mongering. That is the one of the reasons that we closed it. And that should also be one of the reasons that we need to decide whether we're going to reopen it or not. Thank you.
Can we just ask the engineer if we're at any, and if we're at any risk of this bridge collapsing?
Yeah, based on the load limits, assuming that people are obeying the load limits, which isn't a guarantee, there is no risk that we can see from an engineering standpoint. In addition to that, our calculation says it's something more than 20 tons, but we knock it down to that to try and knock that risk down with it. Just a quick comment to the truck route. It's a good idea. You could also install the no trucks signs in addition to the signage that it would take to open the bridge. You could do more than just at the bridge. You could go out from the bridge. Same thing. Something you probably thought of, but it was a good idea.
Could we, or do I need to modify my motion to reopen the bridge based with the caveat following the 1-year inspection that the engineers are recommending, and the load limits. Okay.
We're on 6 months right now.
We're on 6 months.
We're on 6
Do you
months,
want
okay.
those, do you want that changed or keep it as 6 months? It's your motion. You can make the adjustments before we vote.
I'm happy with 6 months.
6 months as
You bet.
is? Okay.
If that would alleviate fears on the other side over there, yeah.
Okay.
Just make a
Yes, sir.
Quick point of clarification. As a bridge inspector, it's my responsibility to do more than 6 months if someday it needs that. So if you lock yourself into 6 months, I might, as a bridge inspector, say, no, it needs to be 3 months. So just know that that possibility is out there.
Okay. So at this point, any more discussion regarding the motion that's on the table? Okay, hearing none, we'll have a roll call, please.
Councilmember DeWitt.
No.
Councilmember O'Donnell.
No.
Councilmember Carlson.
Yes.
Councilmember Blease.
No.
Councilmember Montgomery.
Yes.
Councilmember Sias.
Yes.
Mayor Hop.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Okay. Moving down to item number 7C, discussion take action if appropriate to adopt ordinance number 310, proposed ordinance, zoning ordinance text amendment to include a waterfront lot setback averaging provisions that will require greater setbacks in cases where the average of existing measures setbacks of the buildings and abutment parcels. We're going to stop and we'll allow the public 2 minutes to exit if you choose to exit at this time so we can continue our meeting.
Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Could we take a slight recess in case the meeting is hour and a half?
Nope, I've talked with them and they're aware of things,
Okay,
our
very
timeline, because there's not much left on the agenda
Okay,
to go
very
through.
good.
Sir, we're in the middle of the meeting. You can talk with them afterwards because we're waiting for people to exit and then you can come back. Okay, we'll move back. Moving on with our meeting tonight, 7C, discussion take action if appropriate to adopt the ordinance number 310, proposed zoning ordinance text amendment to include a waterfront lot setback averaging provisions that will require greater setbacks in cases where the average of existing measures setback of buildings of abutment parcels or within 200 feet of certain cases are greater than the waterfront setback required by the applicable zoning district. Changes are proposed for the section 3.270 basis of determining front yard requirements and averaging the setback. Section 9.140 ILO inland water lakefront overlay district and section 9.150 schedule for district standards, the city of Ferrisburg. Yes.
I'd make a motion that we adopt the ordinance number 310.
Support.
Motion support. Any further discussion?
Are we saying that we want to move the buildings back from where they are now?
This was on a, we discussed this at the last council meeting.
Right.
And this was a recommendation from the planning commission.
Okay.
And that would be it.
All right.
So there's a motion support. Oh,
So, to answer the question, on a typical setback for a waterfront lot, they have to be 40 feet back from the water's edge. With this ordinance, if one person's at 100 feet and 200 feet, this person now has to build his house back 150 feet instead of the 40, to keep it more in a straight line.
okay. All right. So all those in favor stating aye?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Moving down to item 7D, discussion take action if appropriate to adopt ordinance number 311, an ordinance to change the composition of the planning commission to 5 members. Earlier, our planning commission chair, Mr. Jonas, approached us and asked us to table this for 6 months. Is this something that council would wish to table, or, yes?
I would make a motion to table it for 6 months and see how, Mr. Jonas does on keeping that.
Support.
Okay, any further discussion regarding this? Down there.
Rich did.
Rich. Okay, all those in favor stating aye?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Moving down to item 7E, discussion take action, if appropriate, to schedule a work session as a regular agenda item on January 20. And the recommendation from staff is to review the stormwater training that staff goes through. Anything else for, I believe that I recommended this and talked with city manager about it, for us to become more educated in the stormwater training as what staff goes through. So we would take some time and review that. I would recommend not adding anything more because it would take some time to review these videos, like 2 or 3 of them or something like that during that meeting, and then move into February for a different work session. Just a recommendation.
Your Honor.
Yes.
The only thing I was going to mention was, I don't know how city staff is coming along with sound system, but tonight is a glaring example that sound system upgrades need to happen.
That information was just in our packet, correct?
Intern is working on that.
Very good. Just so we're moving forward on it.
Okay. Anyone, any other item for work session?
So we are gonna need a work session to discuss the next steps for the bridge now that it's
Correct.
open.
Yep.
When are we able to schedule that?
Do we want to do that January 20 in addition? So we'd have 2 things on a work session?
Is that something we're gonna need Fleece and Vandenbrink back for?
I don't believe so. If we can give directives to the staff, we'd have to go out to an RFQ if you're looking at repairs.
Okay.
Repairs or replacement, or moving forward with the grant application. The grant cycle is now open and it concludes in June. So we do want to discuss that too.
So let's get that on as soon as possible then.
So Smith's Bridge. Okay, any other? All right. Hearing none, we'll move down to public comments. Any additional public comments at this time? Yes, ma'am.
Ann Smith, 17520 Williams, Berrysburg. I just wanted to let you know that I am willing once again to help assist with the grant applications. The MDOT grant application, I believe, is due right around the 1st of May. And so we would really need to get moving on that in order to get a good application. We should get started on that by the end of January, early February at the latest.
Have that on a work session on January 20.
Okay, so I'd be happy to assist.
Thank you. Any additional public comments at this time? Yes, sir.
Roger Jonas, 16038 Harbor Point Drive. Just when I was really getting in the habit of making a right-hand turn instead of a left-hand turn coming out of my subdivision, now we take this action. I appreciate all the comments and questions on that. Understanding construction of anything that's reinforced concrete, let alone a bridge, is very complicated. And that so the more questions you ask, the better, and as opposed to the less. So try and get an understanding of this. And I think council made the right move. I think anything moving forward on repairs now is very necessary. Anything you would like the planning commission to assist on, whatever, please remember, have council just forward something to us regarding anything in the city at this point. And just want to mention the property that the city sold, just to clarify, is just off of Plank Drive and 3rd Street, where there's vacant lots going in there, and the guy that developed the property down by the on-ramp to the city on the west side is also putting in some storage units in there. There's a big demand for that, so money coming into the city, and that was a small lot the city had in there, and it was doing nothing, so that was the property involved. So it was a good idea. Anyway, my voice is going, it's gone. So that's a good thing. And thanks again for all that you do. This council's in a tough position. I appreciate that. And it's doesn't get easier. The new members doesn't get easier. Got some good things to work on. Thank you.
Any additional public comments at this time? Okay, hearing none, we'll move down to managers' reports.
No report?
Move down to council member reports. Councilmember Sias.
No report. Our next meeting is on next Monday, though, for the beautification committee, so I'd like to see as many people out there as I can.
Perfect.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember, please.
The new sponsor and donor sign at Fire Barn Park is up. Looks great. Thanks all that donated their time, efforts, money to Fire Barn Park playground equipment. I will not be at the February 3rd meeting. End of report.
Pro Tim O'Donnell.
No report.
Okay. Councilmember Carlson.
Kitchell Lindquist Dunes Preserve Board is dark this month, January.
It's been canceled?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Montgomery.
No report.
No report. Councilmember DeWitt.
No report.
Okay. What I like to do is thank the public for all of their input into the bridge and their continued support of all of us and our decisions, and for Fleece and Vanderbrink for what they have done. And when council went to vote, I'm glad that people were willing to set aside personal and emotional and voted with what we had at the time. That's very critical, because I don't know if people realize, but it became very emotional for one resident, a male resident, verbally attacked me at a local establishment when I was standing there by myself. So it became very personal, this bridge, to open or close it or not. So by looking at the facts and reviewing information, we can move forward with this at this time. So thank you also to our legal counsel for being here to assist with exceptions to the laws that are in existence. So appreciate that.
Motion adjourned.
Party over there. Party's over there. I don't know, maybe it's just starting. There goes the sun.
What happened to the right cup?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. How are you?